Policy.
Great, right?
Sorry. We are all set.
Oh, on the side? On the side, right here? Along the wall.
Oh, along the wall.
All right, Rob says we're ready to go, so we will go ahead and call the meeting to order. I think we got several folks online today as well as in the room from the board. I'm Keith Norris, I'm the chair of the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and we will start off with our roll call. Dylan McDowell, Vice Chair.
Present.
Alan Alexander.
Here.
Woody Dukes.
Present.
Rick Hartwig.
Here.
Al Holland.
I am here.
Joan Lloyd.
Here.
Debbie Miller is not able to join us today, but we do have a quorum, and so we will proceed with the meeting here. Our first order of business is approval of the March 2024 meeting minutes. April 2024, thank you, I already told you, I forgot which month it was. Approval of the April 2024 meeting minutes.
I make a motion to,
Go for it, Joan.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Seconded by Dylan. Any comments or edits or discussion on the meeting minutes? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, minutes are approved. Next up, we have public comment. And I think you here to provide public comment?
Yes, please. Okay.
Just give me 1 second and then it will be, and I will formally introduce you. Patty Tipton.
Yeah.
Please, would you mind stepping up if that's all right?
Yes.
Thank you.
I gotta get my paperwork.
No problem. And we'll give you up to 5 minutes, Patty.
Oh, okay. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Patty.
It's been a long time.
Hi.
We've known each other
For a
for
while.
years.
Glad to have you here, Patty. Thank you.
My background is kind of simple. I was chair of Lansing Admin for over 20 years. I was in charge of 2 parks, Lansing and Livingston. And our neighborhood not only renamed it, but we also did a lot of work in the park itself. One of those things was putting in 70+ trees in the park over the 20 years. We had nothing. When I took over as chair of Lansing, there was nothing. And now we have a playground, park benches, street light, a fence. And I had to resign because of health reasons. And we now are part of NOLA. For over 10 years, I still felt like I was unfinished where Lansing was concerned. And I'm very strongly connected to Lansing because of all the hard work we put in there. And this year, I finally got the funding after 10 years of wanting, it's my wish list. And since my disease is not progressing well, and I had to face a few hard facts this last year, I would like to accomplish my wish list if it's possible. I've already asked Jennifer about it, and she gave me the legalistic, what I needed to do, which I went to the neighbor who owns the fence at Lansing Park. I don't know if anybody's ever driven down or been to Lansing Park. Has anybody been there? Okay, there's two fences there. One neighbor constantly is painting over his fence and has tried to cover his graffiti. And the other fence has never been painted on the Lansing side. And because I have the funding this year, and I really wish to get this one thing done, I would like to paint the unpainted fence. And I did get the verbal with Nelson. I don't know if you know who Nelson is. He's the family that owns that fence doesn't speak English, and he translated it for me, and I gave him a copy of my paperwork. And I told him they didn't have to do anything. But I would like to pay for that fence to be painted. But I don't want it done until July or August on a Saturday morning early, hopefully. And I don't want to quit until it's finished. So I need all the volunteers I can get to show up that day. I was told that you sent a budget list of how much it's going to cost to paint that fence. I haven't received it. And I need that budget thing. As an accountant, I can't make you a blank check. So if you can send it to me, I sent you my email, and I'll gladly give you a copy of my paperwork if that's what you need, because it has my email and phone number on it. But I need that before I can progress as far as the budget is concerned. Yesterday morning, I attended N2. I don't know if you know who N2 is. They're a nonprofit group that covers McKay area. And also, I'm going to be attending CAPES too and proposing the same thing. I'm requesting $100 from each to pay for refreshments, because you got to feed the volunteers. I am going to be purchasing donuts, coffee, hot water for tea, hot chocolate, and then water, just plain old bottled water, because you don't want them to faint from dehydration. But I am willing to purchase the paint, the brushes, the throwaway brushes, because I don't want to clean the brushes, and the plastic containers to pour the paint in. And I will hand it to them, and I will tell them they could choose whatever part of the fence they want to do, but I need the whole fence painted by the end of the day. This is all I'm requesting. I'm not asking you for money. I am just purely asking for the opportunity to improve the look of Lansing Park and accomplish that one wish that I have. And that is it. But I really do need that budget, Jennifer. So, anyway, thank you.
Great, thanks, Patty. In terms of kind of Sprab's engagement on that, I'll look to staff to kind of see kind of where we could maybe plug in and help encourage the effort or support the effort.
So let me fill in a few holes
Yes.
here. Patty did reach out to me with regard to that and getting, it's not a city fence, it's a private ownership fence. So from a legal standpoint, we need to get authorization from the homeowners. So that took a little bit of time working with Nelson to kind of, as you said, interpret to do that. I did receive that information from you. In conjunction with that, NOLA reached out to me with regard to the project because they became aware of the project. What was not, had not been shared with me previously is that apparently this project was discussed at NOLA, and NOLA had some hesitation about the project. So they reached out to me. I had conversation with them relaying kind of what had transpired, and we were supportive of the project. And then to do that at the time we were waiting, I was waiting for you to get the information from your visit with Nelson. So I've had a couple conversations with the NOLA chair, given of what had transpired. So there was a little confusion, maybe miscommunication on the process, and Patty working with NOLA and getting that kind of through their process. But in an effort to make this and accomplish this, They made the overture that they would be happy. I appreciate what you're saying, but they made the overture as well that they would happy to pay for the supplies. They didn't think that was necessarily your responsibility to do that. They had funds available to do that. And given that they were aware now of the project, moving forward and the conversation had transpired, they made that offer to me for that to transpire. And so the estimate came from NOLA asking me about what that might look like from their coffers to be able to support that. So I did provide that to NOLA. I did send you a couple text messages. I didn't have your email address. I sent you a couple text messages asking for your email address so that I could kind of correspond and so forth. But regardless, so it is a project that's moving forward and facilitating. NOLA got wrapped in a little bit late. They want to help be supportive of you as well and your project. I've talked to Amanda Sitter at the time, who's our Parks Volunteer Coordinator, about providing some assistance and helping with volunteers to make sure that it's a successful project so that you do have enough folks there to accomplish what you want to accomplish in that time frame. So there's been a little bit of moving pieces with regard to this. And so the project's moving forward, and I can have some direct conversation with you, after the meeting as a follow-up. But again, according to NOLA, they wanted to be involved. They were going to bring it to the most recent NOLA meeting. That's what Deanna told me. Yeah, and talk about it and vote on it and indicate utilization of some funds to help support that. So,
And I told her personally and privately, because she came to my house, pounded on my door, told me that she had to talk to me. And then she came in without calling me first because I was in bed sick and wanted to know what was going on. And I told her what was going on and that I have been wanting to do this for over 10 years. But I wanted to get the legalistic part of it done, which I did. And I said, this has been a project of mine for over 10 years, and I now have the funding to do the project. And I didn't ask for NOLA for any money. And I'm not asking for any money from anybody except N2 and Capes, and that is only to pay the troops or the people that come. And that's $100 each for donuts and coffee. But I told her privately that I didn't need funding. They have a long list, a wish list for the 4 parks. One of them is a covered parkway, a covered picnic area, benches for a baseball field, and several other things like a bike racks and so forth in their list. They had a meeting with their parks board meeting, and I was never invited. And what I'm stating is that they didn't ask for my knowledge, my intelligence, or my input on this list, wish list they have for the parks. I have no argument against the wishes, but I do know how much they cost. Street light cost $7,000 when we put it in both Livingston and Lansing. The park bench was $2,500. We put in a playground, which was over $5,000. They need to save every penny they have in their communication fund for their wish list. And they need to find funding for that wish list. I know how hard it is to get those items for a park. And I know how hard I worked to get what we have at Lansing Park. Those trees cost $200 a piece. We put in over 70. I know how much these things, I didn't want any financial from them because I have the funding and I'm willing to do the work. But as far as no one's concerned, all I want is their support. But I had to make sure I got the legalistic part of this project done first. So I knew what I was doing. And I needed that budget. So I knew how much money to plan for this project. That's all I wanted.
So let me say this so that we can move on. I will have, if you don't have to utilize NOLA's funds. It was simply meant as a gesture because they, as a neighborhood association. They didn't want you as an individual to pay for something that they were supporting behind you. If you don't want those funds, you certainly don't have to utilize them, and
I did at
that's
the meeting and when they
Okay.
asked, when they made the motion, but I told her again, publicly, as well as privately, I don't need your money. I want you to save that money for the other things that are on your wish list. Because I know how hard it is to make that money and get those things done. I don't know if any of you ever tried to fundraise for a park, but I have.
So as a follow-up, I will reach back out to Deanna at NOLA and confirm that you came and that you are not wanting to utilize their funds, and so forth. And really then, aside of just letting them know when it's gonna being done, they can take a step back from the project. I'll let them know that you politely have declined. I'll reiterate to that, to them. I will put you in touch with, Amanda, who can help if you would like assistance with to ensure you have enough volunteers and helping to coordinate that effort, which is some initial discussion that we had had. So I can facilitate that happening, so that you guys can pick a date in July, August, whatever, so that you take it. Well, but regardless, we can put her in
My
contact
problem
with
is
you
the weather.
to help with that so that it can be accomplished, and when you want it to be accomplished and in the time frame you want it to be accomplished, July, August, whatever that ends up being. So I'll do that. I'm happy to share with you what the estimate was so that you have some ballpark and what those components are, and we can, park staff, we can provide for you the type of paint that needs, the anti-sealant that needs to be put on top, all of those variables that need to happen and transpire if we're gonna do it in the park. So I will be happy to share those specifics with you, so that you have it regardless of where it's funded, and so that for those pieces. So, and then we can close the loop if that makes sense.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah,
Right.
thanks Patty for bringing it forward and for your passion for the project and keeping this moving.
And the only thing I ask is the color be blue, because to me, blue is very soothing, very calming. And I want to make sure there's enough paint, either for parks or for the neighbor, in case of graffiti. Because if you don't know, people love the tag fences.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if they're privately or part in the parks, but they do love the tag of them. And I would like to make sure there's enough paint. So if the Salem Parks have to come in and cover the graffiti, or they would wish to cover the graffiti, there would be enough paint left over to do that. That is my only other request, because I don't want my paints freshly painted and then come by one day and see it tagged.
And there's always gonna be ongoing maintenance with such projects like that, and I think that's something to work through with Jennifer and Parks Operations as well as with the neighborhood association. But yeah, appreciate you bringing it forward. And
I'm very passionate
best
about
wishes
it.
with getting that implemented here later this summer, so.
I would. He keeps smiling at me. He knows me too well. He knows how I like carrying for the trees.
Any other thoughts from SCRAD members? Questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Patty, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I
Yep.
appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry I'm being such a bother, Jennifer.
You're not being a bother at all. I think there was just a little miscommunication between the neighborhood association and all the players, but
I
it
couldn't
sounds like
bring it
it's all
forward
worked out.
Until I got the legalistic part of it done.
Yeah.
I really want to make sure that I had all my ducks in a row. I don't know if you're I'm an accountant.
Mhm.
And I know that if you don't dot the i's and cross the t's, you never accomplish anything.
Thanks,
Thank
Patty.
you so much for your
Thanks,
time.
Patty. I'll circle back with you.
All right. Next up on our agenda is Tammy with our capital improvement plan. Proposed. Proposed capital. Oh, that was the wrong button.
Yeah.
Take it away, Tammy. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, I'm Tammy Stars, I'm in Public Works Engineering, and I am the lead on the city's 5-year capital improvement plan. Work closely with Jennifer and Rob for the parks portion. I've seen a lot of you before. So I just have a short presentation, mostly It's not one that this is mostly on parks, a little bit on the whole 5-year CIP, but I've tailored this specifically for this group. So some of the highlights in this 5-year CIP, there are 195 projects within this 5-year CIP. 44 of those are parks, 44 are in our parks, and 4 of those are historic structures. It's a $490.7 million in project costs. I think there's 26 funding sources. Mostly those that speak to parks are, of course, state grants, SDCs, the lodging tax, and a little bit of general fund money. This includes, and the GEO bond. Some grant applications is the Riverfront Play Area. That was $1 million grant. And then also this year, the Bennett Dam Complex, which is a $25 million grant that we've applied for, along with a $13 million grant for Guerin Island Bridge. What you can't see behind that slide is on scoring. I wanted to point out to all of you, this year, the committees have been working really hard. When we started scoring and ranking projects originally, it started with the utility. And then we added transportation scoring, and then we added park scoring. And this year, the committees really took a look at the individual infrastructure and wanted to align the criteria per infrastructure, regulatory mandates, safety. And so we did that. And originally, parks projects could score a maximum score of, let's say, 98 points. And utility projects could score a maximum score of 125. And transportation could score a maximum of 73. It didn't make sense, but it's just the way it worked out as we were building scoring and ranking. So the committees have come together this year, and now next year, all of the scoring will be 100 points maximum across any infrastructure category. What we did do this year is all projects in the CIP that are scored, because urban development projects aren't, because they come from their boards. And we have a lot of program-wide projects that are in here that aren't scored. The projects that are scored, we did score all of them on the new equity scoring tool that was built as part of the 2022 livability bond. So there was an equity tool that was built, and the maximum score for equity was 25 points. So every project that's scored in here was rescored on equity based on that equity tool. And if it was a citywide project, it got a maximum score of 12.5. So every citywide project got 12.5 points. And then the others were based on, their census tract and their geographic location. So I just wanted to point that out to everybody.
Tammy, real quick, you have 195 projects, 44 in parks. Is that 44 different projects in parks, or that's not 44 different parks, correct? Do you have any idea of how many?
Right. I don't have an idea of
across
how many different parks, because some of them have several
That's what I was saying, some of them
projects,
have
like
a few different
Riverfront,
ones.
may have
Right.
2 or 3.
Okay.
So this is our allocation of funding by, I say by infrastructure, it's not, it's by funding source. So Fairview has a little bit of development district funding coming in year 2. Donations is for the SPIF projects. Those are the projects that the neighborhood parks for the grant.
Park projects.
That's the match funding. General fund gives $60,000 a year for those SPIF projects. And then there's some funding in the outer years for some smaller project that Jennifer has requested. Then, of course, the 2022 bond, that money's still coming in. We were lucky this year to get some of that lodging tax, or the transient occupancy tax, a lot of people call. So this year we're getting it for the Riverfront Park trash compactor that's going to be put into Riverfront Park. We're getting one also in Wallace Marine Park, and also for fencing around the plaza area at Riverfront Park where the vendors are staged. The OPRD grant, that is at Riverfront Park.
That one is Gear Park, the skate
Gear
park.
Park, the skate park, okay. And then, of course, $12.5 million over 5 years in SDC. So that's the biggest funding source for parks.
Tammy, in terms of the allocation of those with things like the top funds, that's all a city council decision in terms of those allocation outside of the, like SDC I know is in there, grants are in there. I guess who's
The top,
determining those allocations?
well, since COVID, we were pretty much to zero on top funds. So what we had programmed in previous years, once COVID hit, it went down to zero.
Right.
We were getting very little money. We got a little bit of money for the Wallace Marine Soccer area, playground area. They went ahead and left that in. And then we went to zero. This year we were lucky. It didn't go to council. So it came from, I assume, the top board.
The Cultural and Tourism Advisory Board makes those decisions.
Makes those decisions on
Mhm.
where the top funds go.
And so we were able to get $200,000, but nothing out in the out years.
Okay.
So at this time, I feel pretty lucky after going through budget committee, we got that $200,000, so.
That's what,
Yeah.
what I'm asking.
So,
I have a couple quick questions that we can go back. Just a couple of quick questions. One is, can you remind me why the bond distribution is so variable? Why is it not a consistent amount spread over the?
because the projects that are, it's just the way the projects are being designed and constructed.
Okay,
That's all it is.
It's a
gotcha.
big project.
There's also, I think it has to do with the other projects in the bond too, so there's like some big things out there, like the seismic retrofit to the
Gotcha,
centers,
okay.
to the city hall and
Yeah.
other things, yeah.
So some park projects were moved up front.
That makes sense.
Some need less lead time than others, that we can kind of right out of the gate take care of and
Yeah.
kind of meet that need while they're doing some design work for some of the other projects in outlying years.
Okay, just two other quick questions. One, you said donations had to do with SPIF, but it's not always a 1-to-1 true ratio. So and sometimes it's in kind and other things. So are you saying that?
That's right, but we have to have the authority.
Okay.
So we
gotcha.
have to put the authority in the CIP
That-
as well as the
Okay, that
budget.
makes more sense. Okay.
Yep.
And actually, similarly, in full disclosure on the grant item, that's the same thing. We went to council, we got authorization to apply for up to $1 million. We actually ended up
Authority,
applying for.
that's a key, okay. That's really
Yeah,
helpful.
we actually ended up applying for slightly less than $1 million, and still the authority is set at that full amount.
Okay, and then, so this is 5-year plan, reevaluated every year, and so if we go for more grants in the next couple of years, that'll get updated,
Yes.
but that's why it's blank, okay,
Mhm.
that's helpful.
So you can always pretty much assume that your year one, that matches your budget. It has to match the
That
budget.
makes sense.
And year two is pretty solid. I mean, years 1 and 2 are pretty solid. Once you get to years 3 through 5, those are pretty moving parts. Because it is a plan and just due to emergencies or whatever can happen, or another priority comes up, those things can move. And obviously with system development charges, depending on development and what's coming in those out years, we could add more money or we could take away money. So it's not a guarantee. This is not cash in the bank.
That makes sense.
So we do try, as I program projects, I do try to program cash. Always try to program cash first. So those projects are funded, so we know.
I got one more question for you.
Uh-huh,
Sorry,
don't be.
your 15 minutes is gonna go long.
That's his
The-
fault.
Can you give me a sense, and I know I've watched this presentation now a few years, but I can't ever remember what I had. 13 million seems like a heavy investment in capital improvement for 1 year. Is that true? Can you give me a sense, and maybe Jen, you have tried this better, but in terms of over the course of a 5-year plan, is 32 million pretty average for us?
No,
Okay.
it has to do with the bond.
Mhm.
So without that bond, you would not be seeing that.
We'd be down a decent bit there.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So just some of the key projects, so there's 40 parks projects in here. So some of those, just pointing out some of the master plans, the D Street Park, Ellen Lane Park, Rice Hill, Hammond, Hazel Green. These are spread out over 5 years. The comprehensive park master plan is also in there. Some park development, the Gear Park Skate Park and Pathway. And that was recently, is the RFP out now?
Oh, we're negotiating.
No, we're negotiating, so the proposals are in and we're negotiating on that, so that's exciting. We have the Bailey Ridge Park, Brown Road, Fairview Park, Eola Ridge. The playgrounds, the riverfront play area expansion, and the bond has there was 10 playgrounds as part of that. And this year in the CIP, last year they were separated, one, it showed each one of them. This year we combined them because Parks took a look at safety issues and kind of rearranged them based on those safety issues. And, but I did want to point out that Livingston Park is the first park that's going to get the playground, and then Morningside, and then Riverfront, and then Royal Oaks, and then Aldridge Park in 26. So, excuse me. So that's kind of the order of that bond project for the playground facility improvements. So that's why I listed those kind of separate. You won't see them in the book separate. And then, of course, from the bond, we had a lot of the restroom improvements. McKay School Park, which also had shelter, it had a bunch more things in it as well. Bush Pasture Park, Northgate, Wallace Marine Park. And then in the other category, the event fencing that I mentioned that was top funded, the athletic courts, the Fairview Fence Dog Park. We've started Minto Brown parking lot, that is bid. And they'll be starting construction soon on that. So there's a lot of great parks projects in here. I couldn't list them all, but I think it's a great CIP this year. Just as we continue on with our CIP and trying to improve it year after year, we want to continue to identify grant opportunities and refine our scoping and estimating of those high priority projects. And that works all across all of our infrastructure as well as parks. We want to continue updating our master plans and reaching out to the public to see what our citizens want, increase our public outreach. There's been talk and that counselors would like to add climate action as part of our scoring criteria. We're looking to update our CIP map on the city website to make it more user-friendly, and as well as automate our CIP request form on the city website. So one, it's more automated, more user-friendly, and so citizens can go on there and submit requests that come into the committees, whether it be for parks or any other kind of infrastructure. And that is my fast and furious presentation. And this happens to be Woodmancy Park, which I think we're almost finished with finalizing, just a little bit left.
Excellent. We will open it up for questions. Al Holland has his hand raised.
Could you please describe what is to be done at Wallace Marine Park for the restroom? That's one of the projects listed. What is that going to look like?
Go
Is
into
that
the
just
book,
restoring the
Go
restroom
ahead,
that's
you go
there?
ahead. You'll know more than I will.
It's, Al, it's the replacement of the restroom that's near the old boat lounge.
Oh, great. I've been anxious to see that happen. Good.
I won't even say that.
Thank you.
Other questions or thoughts? Thanks, Al. Dylan.
Can you remind me then where we are in the timeline of the process, and is there a role for SPRAV as we're trying to just kind of be better advocates for this? Like, should we think about writing comment to council saying we support the CIP priorities as listed? Are these already all approved, pretty much going through?
So yesterday evening, the budget committee did recommend approval for it to go to council in June.
Okay.
So we're fine. What I'd like to do this next cycle, so we'll start up again July, August, we'll start the whole process again. If you have CIP requests, I would suggest getting those in by December, because we typically we scored a little bit later this year, but I'd like to score by January. I think what I'm going to try this next year is to get out to the advisory boards that I do present at a little bit earlier with like a pre-presentation of what's out there. Just to give, or even a report. It could be a report that just comes at, hey, this is what we're looking at.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, Tammy. And I think, something that it's always awesome information, and it always feels like it's like, cool, great, go for it, right? And that there's not a whole lot of opportunity for input from SPRAV. And so I think the more we can be involved in that, the better, right, from our perspective. We always want to be involved in everything. So recognizing the processes involved, where we can best plug in to understand and like Dylan said, kind of be an advocate for it, I think, would be helpful. It's always been a little bit of a confusing to me on how to best track and visualize and see kind of the capital improvements we have, right? If you think about what we've got close to 50 neighborhood parks, we've got 92 park properties. A number of them are not developed in any way, right? And so what's the timeline on those sort of developments and how does that fit into the scoring process? And I've talked with Rob a little bit about how can we track that? How can we look at the master plan process and track the implementation of those master plans over time, right? I know over the past few years, we've had some master plans that the city has looked to redo because they started to do a project and thought, well, this master plan is now 25 years old, we should probably revisit it, right? And nothing had necessarily been implemented on that particular master plan. And so, but how can we make sure that we are working toward fulfilling those plans that we've done there, and continuing to tackle that? I feel like that's something that we as a board should have a greater awareness of, kind of that overall comprehensive picture.
So one of the things, when we were talking about, when we've had meetings with regard to talking about scoring, so we did talk about SPRAP. We did bring that up in the conversations that we've had relative to you guys rolling into that process and being a little bit more active participants. So for example, on the parks ones, we score independently, but I score them, Rob scores them. Some engineering staff scores them and stuff. So there's certain people who score individually about that. But there, you know, one of the things that we mentioned is maybe there's opportunity before that scoring transpires, before we're doing our individual scoring, is having some conversation, not necessarily with maybe SPRAB as the whole board, but representative from SPRAB about here's the potential projects, here's some things, prior to kind of that scoring process. So you may not be an active scorer in and of itself as things, but having that dialogue and conversation about the projects prior to the scoring happening. And then, so you're aware of it, can offer comment and input. You can hear why staff feels they're important or not important. You know, those kinds of variables. And then as we go into that scoring process, you know, as we're scoring them individually, depending where they fall. But at least being more actively involved and having that dialogue about the projects, and at least being cognizant that we're talking about them or what our feelings are about them, why we think maybe they should be sooner or later, or vice versa, and hearing your input.
How many parks projects were actually scored as part of this year's process?
What did we do?
Probably.
I'm gonna just guess it's about a dozen, because it was only the ones that weren't scored already.
Right, I was gonna say, we have a database of previous year scored projects that haven't made the 5-year schedule yet for a variety of reasons. One, you know, variables will change, there's not funding identified, there's not this and that. So they're tracked through the database so we don't lose sight of them, and then they're scored by comparison. But we've even had ones where we've rescored because a circumstances changed from when it was originally scored that maybe makes it more palatable to revisit it. But each year we're typically just kind of scoring the ones that haven't been scored yet.
Okay.
Right.
Because I guess part of my question there is like, yeah, what defines a project, right? How do you draw particular lines around
Some of the,
certain things within a parks master plan? How are certain lines drawn on what constitutes an individual project?
So Tammy mentioned that there are some programs that are not scored, and so I just want to highlight that. One program would be our account for future park acquisitions. So it's basically a savings account for future acquisitions.
Sure.
We do
Right,
not
we
score
don't.
that. It's because it's for the whole city.
There's a general fund project that isn't bond funded for playground improvements or there's another one, it's not soccer fields, it's courts. It's
multi-purpose court, yeah.
Multi-purpose courts. So there's a small amount of funding there and we don't score those because it could be system-wide. Jennifer could come and say she needs to use that for Reese Hill Park, you know, there's a safety issue and she has to replace a slide or, you know, some other park implement and she needs to replace it and use that funding.
So part of it is a cost level that comes into play. I mean, the amount changes, but it's not gonna be on a CIP if it's a $10,000 project that, you know, may needs to happen. So typically it was $50,000 was the threshold. So if it didn't meet $50,000, it wasn't gonna be, it's not considered a capital improvement program. That's
That's
changing
going to
now.
change.
July, is it July?
It's
Yeah.
going before council in July to raise that to 100,000. Because costs are going
Yeah.
up, project costs are going up, and that 50,000.
It's really,
And
yeah, a small, would, yeah, kind of not be considered a small project. So that's kind of a first thing as to, you know, whether it even is part of the CIP based on what the project is. But anyone can suggest or recommend put in for a CIP project to be, I want this to happen. And then, you know, it's reviewed to see whether it meets that criteria for a CIP project. But anyone can suggest at any time.
And if it's not part of the CIP, so that falls under that 100K as a project, that,
it doesn't mean that it's not gonna be budgeted.
Right.
So projects under that $100,000 limit could still fall into the budget. You know, if we have funding for it, so if
Right.
Jennifer has funding, it's still a capital construction project. Even though it's under $100,000 and we have funding for it, it could be in the budget, you just won't see it in the CIP.
it would just go through a different budgeting
It
process.
just goes through the budget, yeah, and just wouldn't show up in here, but it would show up in the capital construction budget as a new project.
Well, and depending on the amount, it also could just go through the parks operation budget, depending on the
could.
amount. So,
But
Yeah.
we do have projects under $50,000 that are in capital construction that don't show up in the CIP. They're rare, but it does happen.
Okay, good to know. Somebody needs to stop me from talking. Anyone else, please ask questions.
And can I ask a question?
We will open it up for public comment for you, Patty. Go for it.
Okay, I just wanted to ask about Livingston.
Livingston Park, if there's any projects there.
Well, we had it on the list.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Livingston Park is in the early design stage. It's a playground replacement and rehabilitation project. I guess the only notable thing, and this is outlined in the division update, is that we've brought on a consultant to assist us doing some focus groups with the neighborhood. We're targeting the Latinx and African American or Black community specifically. And it's because through our traditional outreach techniques, we know that we are not connecting with those groups. So they just brought them on board. We're really happy to have them. They're going to be helping us develop some connections in the community and holding these 2 focus groups. So we're in that outreach planning phase right now. We're going to be hopefully going out to the community here pretty soon. Because that's next summer. So we're feeling like we need to really get going on that one.
Great, thanks for that update, Rob. Any other questions from the board? Because I asked all of the questions you had.
The answer is not now.
That's all right, no. Okay, well, looking forward to seeing how, as we move forward into the next year's process, like you said, that'll start up this summer, how we can continue to plug in with this. I know we've explored different ways of presenting it to the board over the past couple of years, and so it's a continually evolving process. So looking forward to that. I see, right, these capital improvements as it's a critically important thing for the parks, and so I think it's something for us to pay attention to and to be aware of.
And
So appreciate it.
I'll make a note too, to get with Rob for maybe the September SPRAB meeting. To
Okay.
just bring it up before the board again, that, hey, that's when we're really getting started, and that way it'll bring it up to the forefront for you guys if you're thinking of projects or anything.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'm gonna go get back to work.
I
Love to stay.
would say we can ask more questions if you want.
It's that live TV thing.
All right, next up, we have another discussion topic that will be also question generating, I presume. We're gonna have Jennifer talk to us about the FY25 proposed city budget and the Parks and Recs components of that. Take it away, please.
Thanks, Keith. So as I'm sure you're all aware, and we've had some discussions here at SPRAB, you know, with regard to the status of the general fund balance and the impact that that's gonna have for Parks and Recreation. So way back in September of 2023, which seems like a while ago, when initially those conversations were had by the city manager and council, our direction was really to come up with scenarios with regard to how those reductions would transpire. So we were provided target amounts that we needed to reduce. And Parks and Rec was not unique, but that's where they fell in 24-25. So $700,000 for parks with regard to reductions and $400,000 worth of reductions for recreation. The directive was that we had the ability to fully take those as reductions or some combination of reductions and revenue to make up those amounts. In the case of parks, we'll look at that initially. But in the case of parks does not typically bring in revenue. We're not a revenue derived agency. We have no alternative but to take expenditure cuts. So those scenarios were provided as part of the city manager's department recommended budget. That option of what we shared way back in September was the option that the city manager moved forward to the budget committee for their consideration for what would happen to Parks and Rec. So 4 weeks ago, on the first evening of the budget subcommittees, Parks and Rec falls under the Welcoming and Livable Community Result area. And so we were on the first night of budget. So the Welcomable and Livable Community, really the goal is to develop Salem to be a safe and well-maintained city with a mix of quality housing for all residents, access to parks, recreation, historic and cultural resources, and the arts. So it's those kinds of services and those kinds of functions that are under that result area. So Parks and Rec is a total for the result area. It's $41,967,740. And Welcoming and Livable Community deals with long range and current planning, neighborhood enhancement. The Salem Public Library falls under that result area, homeless and sheltering coordination, social services, affordable housing, parks, recreation, Center 50+, CDBG and home, grant programs, public arts, TOT grants, and then the trust and agency that the funds. So we're part of that whole big umbrella. There's 131 full-time folks that reside under this result area, again, to which Parks and Rec is one piece of that. Go ahead. Thank you. So as I mentioned, sticking first with parks, this was the recommendation by staff, by me, to be honest, as how we could come up with that $700,000 reduction. So the parks reduction, to get there, it would eliminate our seasonal staff for the year. And then other reduction expenses that would have service level impacts. So those would be that there would be no irrigations, systems, bathrooms, or drinking fountains in neighborhood parks. The preponderance of parks that we have are neighborhood parks. Turn off the splash pads, with the exception of the splash pad at Riverfront and River Road, which is a community park, Riverfront, obviously an urban park. The remaining 5 splash pads are in neighborhood parks. Limited evening support, so no closing park staff. And then having a reduction of playground equipment amenity repair or replacement. Go ahead. On the recreation side, coming to the 400,000, recreation, obviously through, as you've seen through other budget documents, they have user fee, there's facility use permits, there's things that they have the ability to derive revenue to help kind of offset that $400,000 reduction. So for us in this scenario, it was really a combination of reducing seasonal staff and program related expenses by $201,000 and then increasing fees affiliated with the various programs by about 200,000. So those service level impacts, there would be fewer program sites and options available in our program, specifically Melinda's programs, dealing with the camps and those types of activities. No movies in the parks, kid relays, or the concert series that the city provides. We would initially looking at eliminating fee waivers that modified a little bit so that we didn't totally eliminate them, and change that fee reduction percentage for those underserved areas. And then increased fees for softball registration fees, parks reservations, and then recreation programs. In addition, for us in our budget, just, a few highlights, even with all the reduction, is we did get, as Mylon kind of mentioned to you folks before, the $1 million grant for the tree planting through the trust. And then, as Tammy was just referencing a lot, various parks bond projects. So the athletic fields, the playgrounds, the parking lots, and then some McKay improvements. So there still would be activity in parks, even with the reductions, we would have the ability to do that. I think we're good for things. So really what's transpired from the meetings is, from the initial meetings, it's fair to say there was lots of public concern with regard to, speaking first on parks, with regard to the impact that would have. We recognize that. One of the difficulties, we had a lot of conversation and public input of, can't you just keep the splash pads? Were a very big component of every budget hearing discussion. Can't you, what does it cost for this to keep the splash pads on? What if we just kept restrooms open? What if we did that? So there was a lot of scenarios provided with regard to those costs. In neighborhood parks, there's a main water meter that funnels that through the neighborhood parks. So if we turn off the irrigation, we can't individually take water to the splash pads. We can't individually keep the drinking fountains. It's either on or it's off. That's a huge cost for us. Obviously, if you're not watering things, aside from those amenities being, you're not having to mow, you're not having to spray, you're not having to do those other components. You're not having staff, which, if there's no growth, you're not having staff out mowing all of the time. So, that was, unfortunately and disproportionately, we recognized, but a means to hit that high threshold for parks where typically revenue is not derived. Community parks and the urban parks have reservable areas. So those made sense to us to invest money and keep those services open, because we're bringing revenue into the city to be able to offset some of those expenses. Neighborhood parks are not that same situation. So that's why was disproportionately impacting neighborhood parks. Like I said, it was fair to say there was a lot of concern from various neighborhood and the public with regard to that impact that was happen. Splash pads we heard a lot about splash pads and the impact that had, which is unfortunate. But when we have a directive to make cuts, we have a directive to make cuts. And so, we have a very limited amount of opportunity where those can transpire. In not last night's budget meeting, but the meeting before, a motion was going to be made, did not end up being made, but was to restore the 700,000 using ARPA funds. ARPA funds are located in the Cultural and Tourism Fund. You may have heard that the library was slotted for a lot of reductions. It was reinstated, the 1.1 million, and the ARPA funds were used for that. ARPA funds are one-time federal funds that the city got when we were in the COVID period and we weren't bringing in TOT money. So ARPA stands for the American Rescue Plan Act. And so we received $3 point some million in a one-time thing. and they can be used in any manner. So there's not the confines that normally there is around the normal tot dollars to use. So they were really an opportunity to use those. There had already been in a previous meeting, again, to reinstate for the library. So there was discussion, a lot of discussion in utilizing those same ARPA funds to reinstate the 700,000 to parks, because there was recognition that the impact that would have, on the public, by not utilizing those. That motion wasn't made, it was tabled until last night. In between those 2 weeks, there was a lot of discussion with myself and budget office and a few council members through questions on what could that look like if we reinstated the neighborhood parks, if we gave you some money back. So what I came up with was basically $422,000. For $422,000, it doesn't completely restore the $700,000 deficit. What it does give us the ability to do is to turn back on the irrigation in neighborhood parks, to allow that to transpire, which was a big issue. It allows us to bring some seasonal staffing on, which we did not have seasonal staffing, the ability to do that. Not at the levels that we typically do, but to be able to bring some on to support those parks activities, as well as support the weekend and evening activities, not only in parks, but for events, because that had been cut. It did allow us some ability to do some amenity replacement. So if there was a particular playground piece or a drinking fountain or something like that, that from a priority standpoint, maybe raised a threshold that it was a safety issue or so forth, we would be able to do some replacement relative to that. Not total, but some replacement. So it would restore to a certain extent some service levels in our parks. I think it's important to note that even if we, under normal circumstances before the reduction, we did not have the ability to maintain all of the parks given the growth that we have. Our staffing levels are less than they were in 2008. And there has been lots of development and lots of growth. So even if we were reinstated at 700,000, it puts us at the same level we are this year, but it's still behind the 8 ball. So 422,000, we're more than appreciative of that, but that still leaves a big hole of what we can't do. But it gets to us the core of meeting kind of the public response to what we do, those kind of core areas in parks that they felt was important, and kind of prioritizing the other things. So, some of our contracts that we typically have, some of our other services, some of the training that we normally do for our staff for efficiency, unless it's related to licensure or certification, we're not doing. So there's a lot of variables that we can't do and won't be able to do. But in the scheme of priorities, it does put money back into the parks and be able to service those. So last night, that motion was made. That motion did pass the budget subcommittee. So that's a positive step. So that's the difference between the 709 from what we recommended and the 422. So we think that goes a long way to listening to the public and addressing those areas of concern. With regard.
So just real quick, you said 709, but then you restored 422. So it's a total 290,
90, something we're still under, yeah.
And
And the recommendation is to use those ARPA funds. But again, there was a lot of discussion as to where does that leave the working fund balance. Part of those ARPA funds were going to be utilized on our historic facilities, at Deepwood, Gilbert House, some of Bush House, some of those, there's roof replacements that need to transpire. And those are very large ticket items. And so that money originally, not in totality for what we received, but a significant chunk of that was going to be used for those roof replacement kinds of things. And so really the dilemma from the subcommittee was if we fund the library, if we fund parks, if we fund this, what does that working balance, capital balance look like? Do we have the ability to still do some of these deferred maintenance things? And if we don't do them now, even if it's a 3 to 5 year span that they're looking at doing that, how do we recoup that money to be able to do that at a later point, kind of thing? And is it, again, kind of pushing the can down the road? Because this is one-time money that parks would be able to use. It's not ongoing. It's just for this year to kind of do a little bit of a stopgap. What does that look like for next year? Does that make it more detrimental next year? So should we just kind of bite the bullet this year and do it all, or not? So there was a lot of, discussion in each meeting relative to that. But ultimately they decided that, and it puts a lot of pressure, a lot of discussion, Keith, on the revenue subcommittee on trying to find other avenues to help with those efforts. So the second area, which with a lot of conversation, was relative to recreation services. There was a significant discussion really for the three things, the three family-friendly community events that were going to be, were slotted for reduction. Movies in the park, the kids relays, and the, what were called last year, the Friday night concerts, but the concert series, the 3 concert series that the city puts on and sponsors, mostly over the summer period, except for the kids relays. There was a lot of community response relative to eliminating those, again, kind of free family events. A lot of concern about those not being available and other things that maybe are not available in Salem if those were taken away for families to do. So there was a recommendation again to utilize, and a motion made to utilize ARPA funds to reinstate $96,000, which is the total of those 3 things without any sponsorships or donations, $96,000 to restore those for this year. So again, kind of a stopgap to let that happen this year. And then again, look for opportunities of how those might be dealt with in future years. So there was extensive discussion relative to weighing the community's input and their support of doing those programs with, again, tapping into a very small potential working capital of the ARPA funds, or just not have them. Did it just make sense to stop them now, as opposed to potentially stopping them next year? Ultimately, there was a vote by the subcommittee last night on that as well. That did pass. However, it was a extremely slim margin on passage. The next step in the budget concluded last night with regard to the subcommittee voting to basically individually all of the different result areas, moving those to council for consideration on June 10th is when the council meeting is. So
My question was gonna be, when you're saying subcommittee, you mean budget committee,
yes,
not the.
not a
Not
council
the-
subcommittee, it's the budget committee. That's
And
part,
I
have
was comparing
council.
that to your, what's called the output. The results.
Oh, the results are, yeah.
Results.
So
So you're
it's,
talking the full budget committee.
it is, right. So
What was
which
that?
is a combination of budget represent from the community and then council members.
Right.
So June 10th, this will be presented from the budget committee with recommendations to restore $422,000 to parks and $96,000 to recreation to hold those events. Council can certainly agree with those recommendations or not agree with those recommendations and remove those. They have that discretion. So we won't know definitively one way or the other until June 10th. From the parks piece of it, the margin of approval was significantly larger. I think there was a couple folks who didn't necessarily think that the money should be used at this time. Not that they weren't supportive of parks necessarily, just supportive of using those funds for this during this period, given the budget climate that we're in. And so we will see, but I think that, kind of the likelihood is probably a little stronger that there will be support from council to reinstate for those funds for that to transpire. I think, it's up in the air with regard honestly to the 96, given the outcome of the vote, although it was affirmed. It was, again, a very close vote, and that, again, is subcommittee members and council members. When it's just council, we'll see how that transpires. So that is kind of where we stand with regard to what we presented, what potentially is getting put back in, what kind of the consensus of the budget committee was, as well as next steps. One of the things I think that I would stress, and I know Dylan and Keith, you and I and Rob have spoken about this previously, but one of the things I think that it's really important kind of to highlight in this process, especially when dollars are so very few. The preponderance of the dollars that are through the general fund and that are utilized are for police and fire, what is considered essential services for the city. They're the preponderance of where the general fund dollars go, significantly higher than any other area. And I think, from a Parks and Rec standpoint, I think one of the things that is important, and if you're looking at for SPRAB on, where there can be benefit, I think it's really kind of in the messaging with the public. From our standpoint, Parks and Rec are essential services. So it may not be, but for a lot of folks that they're not. They think of police and fire and are very limited in that definition of essential services. And I think where potentially SPRAB can be beneficial is really with the public in sharing that there is a place for parks and recreation, that they are essential, that there is an important role for, mental health, with regard to a variety of different things, and maybe kind of making that shift for folks that, parks are not, something, well, it's just nice if you have them, that there really is a role in an everyday, and for it to really be a good, solid community, that Parks and Rec need to be there. The same as libraries, same as some of those, because there is a tendency for departments as a whole that fall under community services. Community services umbrella certainly took the biggest hit, with library, Parks and Rec, and all of that, with regard to the number of departments that had to make reductions. That there is a role in the city and those are all important components, and no one is saying that fire and police are not important components, but these are important too. And so helping with that messaging may be beneficial for folks. So that's where we stand. That's kind of thing. So if you have any questions or need anything clarified, that's where we're at.
Great, thanks, Jen. Appreciate the overview there on kind of that process that's been going on, like I said, since last September. We'll open up here for questions, but just to give folks some context, right? I think as Jen said, there was an initial ask for 700,000 reduction and 400,000 reduction. The overall Parks and Recreation budget for FY24 is 9.2 million. And so that's about a 12% reduction they were asked to provide. Now, some of that is, as she said, has been kind of restored through some of the budget committee actions, or has at least it proposed to be restored through some of that budget committee action, but still a reduction off of that. And so I think, part of why we had this be put on the agenda is for our awareness, as it is related to parks, and our role in kind of advising city council is on all matters related to parks, and the things that they are involved with. And so we wanted to be sure you all were informed on kind of the status of the various budget proposals and discussions that were coming before city council, so we could consider what our role is in that. So with that, I will open it up to questions from the board. Any questions, comments, discussion? Dylan, go for it. Not seen by you guys didn't raise, right? I was just looking online. Sorry.
That's good. Thank you. Field question, you want to go first? I always go first, you should go first. Go, Woody, take it away.
Oh, when I saw that, the consideration of turning off irrigation, concerned me quite a lot. I know that the maintenance manager of the Land University is instructed to turn off the irrigation at Willamette. And over time, the trees started dying off because they're used to this water. So there's the possibility of, making some adjustments there somehow, but, the south end of Bush Park, they started reducing irrigation at the south end, and I'm not sure if they are giving any irrigation during the summer at all and now, but they were, but they were weaned, they were, they drew the water irrigation down, they didn't just cut it off. Although those are savanna trees.
So in the neighborhood parks, I mean, we recognize we've even done recent tree plantings in neighborhood parks and stuff. So, during those establishment periods, we have other funding streams besides general funds that we can provide water so that some of those kinds of things like you're talking about doesn't transpire. I mean, I don't know the extent, I mean, I had heard about Willamette, certainly I received information on that. But for what we were doing to a certain extent, I mean, we live in a climate that for a lot of months, it's a lot of rain and so forth. So for some of the areas in parks, and every park is a little different, but how they're constructed is, from our standpoint, for a couple of months where there might be high intensity, you do have lots of months where, we're not irrigating, it's a lot of rain, and it could help kind of sustain to get us through there. Now, does that mean that there wouldn't be, some impacts or some things that might die off and all of that? Yeah, potentially. I mean, that would transpire. So, but in our more focus was relative to the trees, and especially with regard to the tree plantings that have transpired. But because we have other funding mechanisms for that to transpire, that is not general fund that we use. We have a tree fund for watering and plantings and those kinds of things. We could continue to do those specific kinds of irrigation related activities in those areas where we needed to, but globally did not have the expense of keeping all of those services on, every day, for the year, throughout the year.
Well, I'm not specifically talking about new trees, because I know that.
Yeah.
Watering and everything, but when you talk about all the rain, trees are usually in the dormant stage when all that rain is coming. And when they're out in leaf, that's usually in the drier period.
Yeah.
And they're used to, I'm just saying that they have gotten used to a certain amount of water, the way they establish their root systems in the soil to so that's my concern.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, it's really, there's no scenario, and budget committee recognizes that too, and the city manager and everybody does. There's no good scenario. I mean, it's what's the worst, what's the worst of two evils kind of thing. And so in the long run, what is more manageable? What can we do with what we have left? We had to look at if we don't have seasonal staff, as from your history previously, but I'm sure other folks know, we gear up in the summer with a lot of seasonal staff. We have for the amount of parks, we have a very, very small core staff that is out maintaining all of those parks. And so if you're looking kind of globally on where you have to utilize those resources, right, in which parks, it's going to be the community and again, as disproportionate and unfair as that is to neighborhood parks, you're putting those resources and those very few staff in community and urban parks and focusing those dollars that you have, those limited dollars, on where you're getting money back. And again, it's unfortunate that that's what the driver is, but that's the reality of it when you have to make cuts, and we don't have other income that comes into parks. So that's,
I totally get the whole.
Yeah,
I get
but
all
it's
the
not a
problems
good,
and everything. I just
it's
wanted to
not a good
express my
situation. Yeah,
concerns of.
I get it. I
Yeah.
agree with you. Yeah.
And I know that happens, it happens, I mean, we're gonna lose trees, but,
Well, I think, if this goes through on June 10th, and we're hopeful, given again, it's not a given, but, you know, given indicative of what the vote was yesterday, we're hopeful that June tenth, at least that piece passes. Then that concern gets addressed and, you know, again, it still isn't the service levels that we would like, but it addresses, you know, some of those concerns like that you're expressing.
And I think that's a good note, Woody, and something for, you know, as we think about our role on SPRAD, making sure that council is aware of those ramifications. I'm sure staff has made them aware, but also us making them aware of kind of those as those effects trickle down and trickle throughout the park system, what could that potentially mean? So Dylan, what are your thoughts,
Yeah, I guess-
questions, comments?
To jump, I guess just a couple of things. One is to jump off of Keith's point. I'd love to use this as an example to revisit how, when things come to SPRAB and the budget, and how we can be more involved with some of that, because I think some of these conversations, like I know I've gotten questions about this from budget committee members that, well, you know, did you all approve these, or did SPRAB support these, or do you know about all the extent of these? And I know, like Keith and I had a chance to ask you all some questions about it, but I think this was a unique situation of like some pretty big budget cuts that have come through. But I do think that in the future, it'd be nice to figure out a more consistent way that SPRAB is informed and part of the budget process. And I think this could have been a case where if it had come to SPRAB and we had like endorsed, basically said, we support staff on this and gone and then had that go to council as a way to add support to it would have been helpful. And I'm not gonna make any motions or anything, but I think something would be useful to explore in the future would be if there is like a standing budget subcommittee almost that, and that might just be the chair and vice chair in this case, where we all can like be the advocates, talking with you all, understanding it at a deeper level. So it's not a full board conversation, but then when it does come up for a vote, maybe in this case, it'd be Keith and I that would be sitting here alongside you saying, no, we've like dove into the numbers with Jen and Rob. We understand all this too. You know, let's have a chance for Woody to ask questions like about the trees, things that we might not be thinking about, but then it provides that level without making it a full-blown meeting every time. And so I'd like to use this if we could explore that more in the future. Because I think that could have helped then go into the budget committee to say, well, you know, these are tough decisions, all the things you're saying, there's something has to get cut. We as SPRAB recognize that, we endorse this as the best of the worst options or the bad options. So I think that's kind of point one that I'd like to bring up is that I think I'd like to see if we could get this in front in the future. So then as things go to the budget committee, we are aware of that conversation happening. And I think the other piece is, maybe Leanne, this is a question that you could help with, is as things that are really pertinent go there, they could be forwarded out to SPRAB as an FYI of like, you know, SPRAB members, you may be interested to know that this vote went through, or here's the proposal that went to the budget committee for the cuts laid out. You know, if that's in a document, that would be helpful to make sure we're all, oh yeah, that's right. I have that in my inbox.
So one of the things, it's fair to say, I spent the last 4 weeks a hugely significant amount of time addressing lots and lots and lots of budget subcommittee or committee questions and so forth. And you know, I don't know if and we can have discussion about this later, if there's an opportunity as those questions are being asked, because ultimately it becomes public information, right? I'm preparing responses that's provided in packets. Those responses to the committee is sharing. Maybe there's an opportunity there to sharing those responses with SPRAB, so you're aware of here's the questions that the committee is asking. Here's what we're saying to the, you know, what I'm saying to the committee with regard to those responses, because that, especially this year, it was hugely more significant, and obviously that was because of the circumstances. Normally, there's not that preponderance. So many questions, so many kinds of, you know, every day, so many questions. But, you know, it's good because that hopefully helps them understand, you know, where we're coming from and stuff, because, you know, we obviously want them to make thoughtful and informed decisions. So, you know, that's part of it. But this year there was a lot of that, and hopefully we're hoping that information was useful as they made the decisions that they made last night, that helped in, you know, the outcome that we had last night. But maybe there's an opportunity as those are being is to share that information with SPRAB members so that they're more cognizant of here's kind of that active engagement that's happening with council, and here's what we're sharing with them. And part of that, to be honest, and it's not meant as a thing, is it's really a very extremely fast
Definitely.
track kind of thing where it's, every day asked, answered, asked, and by the end of the day, asked, answered, asked, answered.
And I don't think it'll
compliance
ever
and
be
sent.
like all of those,
Yeah,
but I
but
think some of
it's-
the high levels of what you're saying.
But I think I think it's important to reference that because, this goes June 10th, so June 11th, we're gonna start probably, having some with all being facetious, but June 11th, because the budget scenario is not better for next year at this point in
Right.
time. It's, if anything, it would be considered great if it was at the same level, probably, so it wouldn't be a surprise if we're back to, you have to reduce 700 or more next year.
First 10% is a lot easier than the
Yeah,
next 10%.
so this just kind of put it, it's still a reduction to us, but it kind of just moved it out. And so, so realistically, we are going to start having those discussions, which, circumstances change from year to year with regard to how, what parks and which ones have been developed and what, the issues are and all of those kinds of things. And so we're going to start having those discussions as, thinking about, we're asked to make reductions. What do those reductions look like? Do they look the same? Or if they're deeper, where it's this now plus this, and what does that look like? And so I think for this upcoming year, I think there's a lot of things that will be very relevant to as we're doing the 25-26 budget, and there is that opportunity for some of that direct engagement with SPRAB to be kind of parts of those conversations and work that through.
I like that a lot, and I think that, maybe even not calling it a subcommittee, but maybe if we were to think about the work plan roles of having a chair or vice chair, be like budget liaisons or something, like a liaison, I think might be a safer word than, especially from a public process standpoint. And then having that be kind of like taking that as a responsibility of being more involved in that, but I would like to see some of these come, and I think in some cases have like a SPRAB endorsement behind it. And I guess my other question, Mickey, I know you may be stepped away, but I think, thinking about this, the really exciting opportunity of the council liaisons for SPRAB is if you can help us identify really key inflection points for us to get involved in these processes. So I think one of my personal regrets is not trying to galvanize more folks for public comment at the budget committee meetings, just due to time. I think in hindsight, there could have been a better opportunity for that. And I think, so, but, if in the future, if you can maybe even send us a note of, SPRAB, I want to make sure you're aware this is going to be coming up, you get, especially for committees that you're part of, and then we can hopefully turn out letters and be there as an advocate for you to help support your cases. You're making that. And I guess to follow that, my question would be going into the council meeting, it might make sense for us to write a letter. So I'd like to consider a motion tonight for Keith and I potentially to draft a letter to council supporting the reinstatement of these funds as they stand, to try and add that extra push, especially on the rec one that's somewhat controversial.
See, I think that was gonna be my next thing. I think there's still an opportunity in this because it's coming to council June 5th, and especially because, these things weren't unanimous. There were some things that certainly happened at budget committee that had nothing to do with Parks and Rec where the outcome was a unanimous vote, but these weren't. And especially, if depending on your sentiment with regard to the recreation and those things that are those community events, where there's maybe potential for a different outcome when it just goes to council. Maybe or maybe not, but I think it's kind of a crapshoot.
We appreciate it.
Mickey, I see you wanted to provide some thoughts on that.
I wanted to mention how much I appreciate this discussion because I was thinking last night before we were voting on this, how much I would have appreciated your input. And I was sad that this meeting was today and not before the budget meeting. So I really appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councilor Barney. Other thoughts from you?
I mean, do you want me to make a motion?
Let me see if there's any other questions on the budget or discussion on the budget. Any other thoughts from those online while I'm looking at you? I guess I can see Woody and Rick up there too. You guys are all good? Dylan, formulate a motion.
I move that SPRAB write a letter to be signed by Chair Norris, and I will support, that endorses the budget committee recommendation to restore funding to parks. And that letter will go to council ahead of their vote in June.
Second.
Second by Rick. Any discussion, thoughts on that motion to draft a letter to council supporting the budget committee's restoration of some of the cuts? Al,
Should a dollar amount be included in that?
should a dollar amount be included in that? I think in referencing the restoration, I don't know that our letter will include a dollar amount. I'm not sure the motion needs to, if that's what your question is.
That's fine.
We'll base it on the specific recommendations that came out of the meeting last night.
Thank you. Fine.
Alan, did I see you raise your hand as well? No? Okay. Any other questions, thoughts on the motion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right, motion passes. We will get that letter together. Thank you all for your engagement. Any other thoughts on the budget?
One more comment.
Fire away.
Very brief, it's just, I think all of us, we will have a SPRAB letter, but all of us have the opportunity as individuals to comment. And so writing a quick email as public comment for the meeting to say you support the restoration of the budget, I think is important. And thinking about networks we might have, whether it's neighborhood associations that you'd want to support something. Alan, I know you also play a role on the Salem Foundation. So it could be interesting to have the Parks Foundation also say they support the restoration of budget items as well, if you're comfortable passing that along. So just trying to think about folks, I think the library has been an incredible example of really galvanizing community support. So the more we can do that, I think we can support right now.
Great, thank you, Dylan. Next.
Try and talk. Please mute it.
Who was it?
Yeah, Alexander.
Oh, no, he just blinked.
Oh, I thought he was talking.
Next up on our agenda is Neighborhood Association Outreach Assignments. And I failed in what I had promised Rob I would do, which would be to actually make those assignments. However, we're gonna just do it on the fly right now. And so what Rob has pulled up there on the screen is what the assignments were for our Neighborhood Association Outreach last year. So all of these dates are last year's dates. Make note of that. These are not the dates of the meetings. Do not show up on those dates.
Point of order,
Yes,
there are two of us that will no longer be here.
correct.
So wouldn't you need to wait until the new members to make the assignments?
We, what we will do is pencil in those assignments barring the, so you're right, in that the members that are departing, which we're going to announce later, FYI, spoiler alert. We will pull them off of this list. They will be replaced with the incoming members. And then there will be an opportunity for those incoming members to have a chance to review it, offer their thoughts, and we can tweak this throughout. What we want to do is have a general plan moving forward. So that way some outreach can initiate as the summer months get going. And as some of these neighborhood associations are extremely good at planning meetings months out. And so we want to make sure we get a chance to get on those agendas as we have it. Was that clear? Kind of, sort of?
Kind of, sort of.
Okay, that's good. That's good enough for me.
In the interest of streamlining things and building relationships with each of these, is there any reason we don't want to consider just adopting the same schedule, so folks kind of get a familiar face, and that'll make it easier to follow?
There, from my sense, so, and Joan, I'll get to you real quick as I respond to Dylan. My initial sense is, generally speaking, yes, we should keep the same approach unless there's a particular reason not to. But that's kind of my default, would be to do the same. But Joan, go ahead, please. You seem like you had thoughts.
I have only one, and Debbie has 3. And since I'm sort of representing Northeast neighborhoods, may I have Grant, the Neighborhood Association, along with Nen?
just for historic context, Debbie requested Grant, she had a connection there. I know she's not here today, unfortunately.
Right.
Joan, you also have Nesca assigned to you, just
Oh, I
pointing that
didn't-
out. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Don't wanna mind, Joan? No, that's okay. No, that's a good note, Joan, and I think as a general note of awareness, right, this is what we're doing here is kind of naming the lead person to do that outreach. So Joan, if you wanna talk with Debbie about kind of working with her on that outreach to Grant, but I think that's totally open, right? Cause I appreciate kind of the regional aspect you're looking to take there. Does anybody else have any other thoughts on kind of this assignment? If not, what we'll do is we'll seek Debbie's kind of input. We know we have a couple of new members coming on the board, and so we will also seek their input as well. But barring that, I think we can kind of move forward with these assumptions. Does that seem reasonable to you, Robin?
Yes.
Okay. Reasonable to everybody else? Anybody opposed to kind of moving forward with these assumptions of the same neighborhood associations we had last year? Ow.
Can work. It can work.
It can work. Good. All right. We're gonna make up a little time and call that done. Look for that to come sometime. I was gonna say before the next meeting, but if we want other members to look at it, we'll be in further communication about that. Feel free to initiate kind of some of the outreach to some of those neighborhood associations, particularly those that you know might be scheduling things out into the future to make sure we get at least some spread presentation on the agenda.
I will send that document out on Monday to everyone.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Rob. That document will come as its last year's version on Monday.
Well, you could update the dates for
Next,
this year,
well, we probably could.
right? Or not, never
Although,
mind.
although Rob's thing with dates lately.
Yeah. That was like, oh, yeah, about Wednesday, Thursday, fine.
Next up, we have board member updates. And in particular, what I have here is a note for research committee assignments. And kind of thinking if there are any updates from the various research committees that we have, the three that are that we have up and running, that I'm sure you all are at least 50% of the way done with your memos and projects on. Wanted to give a chance here to see if there were any questions on that as you have kind of grappled into those research committee assignments. Joan, I know you and Debbie have taken off on a few fronts, so you have thoughts on that?
Well, Debbie asked me, in her absence, that I would find out. She sent you, Keith, I believe. Do you have an answer yet
She
for
did.
her?
I forwarded those on to some staff, albeit I did it considerably later than what Debbie had originally sent them to me. So there was certainly a delay on my end, but those got to staff at some point in the last month. I don't think we have seen a response to that.
So they did. I forwarded them to Mylan, kind of to talk about
Okay.
the urban forestry kind of aspect from his side. And then Noe, and I know Noe received it because he mentioned it to me yesterday because he was a little confused on what he was supposed to do.
What was this?
Yeah, kind of thing, because he was like, I thought I already sent them information, what we do for Parks Up. So anyway, so he's aware. I kind of reminded him about the subcommittee SPRAB and all of that. And so you'll be getting a response from, those have been forwarded to staff. You'll be getting something from Mylan and Noe, or one condensed version from Mylan, but from those two folks from the different parts of parks.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, Joan, you can pass along my apologies to Debbie also, because there was a delay on mine. Of it sitting in
You
my
have to do
inbox
that.
for far longer. So. But it's in the works.
Yep.
Other research committee questions, thoughts? Anybody else gotten started?
We started the document.
Dylan has
I
a
need to share
document,
that
that's
out,
good.
so. I've written down some ideas.
Cool, all right, well, that's mostly why I put on the agenda was as a reminder to keep moving those forward. And you know, I think we talked about having those presented in October, if I remember my memo correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
And the summer always goes quickly, so keep some attention on those if you could. Any other board member updates? All right, on my own end, I did get a letter off, that was approved at our last meeting related to, that was the OWEB grant, right?
Yes, for the Minto Island Conservation Area Restoration.
Correct, got that letter off, and I think I saw in the materials it was awarded. Is that a different one?
That's a different OWEB grant.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool, I was surprised, I was like, wait, I literally just signed this, there's no way the state moved that fast. Okay, so we did get that letter off, that was approved at the last meeting, and so that has been completed. And then my other note is just revenue task force, and continuing to engage on that front. The tension in the revenue task force room, I think, is growing, as our deadline is approaching, and we're feeling the need to kind of come up with particular proposals. So a number of ideas being floated there, a number of different thoughts on how can we fund libraries and parks and some of these key elements that we know the city residents care a lot about, and direct some funding in those directions. So to Dylan's point of earlier public comment, our revenue task force meetings always have a public comment opportunity as well. So I encourage you to engage in that as you see fit. And I expect by next month, I will have I think we have 2 revenue task force meetings before the next SPRAD meeting. So I expect I'll have some more updates for you on kind of where that's headed, more specifically for the city. Any questions, thoughts on that? I know that was a ridiculously vague update. Almost designed to not invite questions.
A vague response.
All right. Next agenda item is information reports. These were the written reports. I saw Maureen was on earlier, but it looks like she had to jump off. Anybody have any questions or thoughts on the written reports?
Yes,
Go for it, Al.
I only had a minor observation in that on one of the reports, I believe is the Mission Street Parks Conservancy, referring to the beautification efforts. There are 3 references in the paragraph early in there to the beautification efforts, but that word is misspelled in the report twice. Once it's good, twice it's not. So if it's going to be published elsewhere, somebody might want to jump on that and put in the U in beautification.
Noted. Thank you, Al. Any other questions or thoughts in the written reports?
He's doing well, because it's 12:38 in the morning.
I know.
in Athens.
I'm trying to get us through here so we
Yeah.
can let him get some rest and enjoy his vacation.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're working on it, Al. Just one more thing. So we have new business. The new business, which we already spoiled a little bit, is that we do have 2 members of the board that will be departing soon. Or at least that's the expectation. And because the Boards and Commissions Committee of Council has moved forward 2 new appointees to SPRAD. And so Woody Dukes and Rick Hartwig, excuse me, terms have concluded. They've actually both been staying on with us past their terms. I think Woody's now 2.5 years past when his term's expiration was. And so the Boards and Commissions Committee has moved forward nominations. We are expecting those will be approved by City Council in 2 weeks-ish, at the end of the month,
I have a
right?
question about that, because if we're supposed to have 9 members, they're only replaced 2, and we only have 8.
So one of the 9th seat is a right now in kind of the city code is a school district seat.
Yeah, Dave's.
Is how that is, and so that's,
Okay. I knew it
The
was.
continually vacant one. So that's the 9th.
Okay.
That's the 9th one. But I wanted to take this opportunity to make sure we thank Rick and Woody, and I guess I also wanted to announce the new folks that are coming in. So we have Mauricio Flores from Ward 4, who's taking over for Woody's seat, in kind of the forestry, technical expertise, tree focus that Woody provides to us. And then we have Zachary Hammerly. Anybody else want to? Hammerly, Zachary Hammerly, from Ward 3 will be joining us as well, and Rick's seat. And so we'll be looking to welcome them at our June meeting, but did want to take a moment to recognize Rick and Woody for their dedication and service and expertise that they provided to SPRAB over the years. So Rick, you've been with us since 2021, been here about 3 years, and very much appreciate those all of your input that you've had in the meetings. And so we've got a certificate for you here.
Thank you.
And Woody, and you were appointed back in 2015.
Oh my.
And so so you far outdone your service there, but appreciate it, gentlemen. Thanks for all of your input and engagement here.
Let me say that.
Yes, and I would give you guys a moment to say a few words as well.
I am, I came in and the learning curve was a little steep at the beginning. But I just want to compliment everything that I've seen with the city staff and Rob and everybody. And Dylan and Keith, you've done an incredibly good job. I'm hoping that I'm hoping somebody to get back on. And I am totally impressed by the hard work of all of everybody, the staff as well as the volunteer boards. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope we can keep in touch.
Great, thanks, Rick. Woody, any thoughts?
Well, so I stayed on because I was on the committee that helped rewrite chapter 86.
Right.
Which was, that would be an arboricultural expert on the board. And I thought of it as the same as with Dave, with the school district. There needed to be someone there the whole time. And if I left and there was a vacancy, then if something came up, it might be an issue. And so that's why I volunteered to continue to stay on. I almost feel like I'm trying to get on the board instead of leaving it, but I just want to make a few comments. This month is my anniversary of being a professional arborist, which is 51 years.
Wow.
And that started in the city of Salem in 1973 on the tree crew for 25 years.
My trees.
And I was the 345th certified arborist, certified by ISA, certified in International Society of Arboriculture, and graduate of Pacific Northwest Park Recreation Maintenance Management School, which was fantastic. And I volunteer at was friends of Busch Gardens. I started with them, and now it's Mission Street Parks Conservancy. But I was on that board there, and also volunteered at Deepwood. And I was just this morning pruning the camellias around the foundation of the house. And then I also volunteered at the Lawrence Private Home Garden on Mission Street, and I've been there since 2007, doing pruning and such. But anyway, yeah, so I was on the tree committee for chapter 86. So I was also on the Community Forestry Advisory Committee for the Community Forestry Strategic Plan, and with Joan. And anyway, I'm hoping to continue to volunteer, and do what I can wherever, maybe come back here at some time. I don't know, at some point, but I'm proud of the work that we've done since I've been here and thinking especially like with the tree issue, saving the horn beams on the 400 block of Division over by the police facility that they were wanting to remove all of. And I would like to see the follow up and get the heritage tree program back, get it going. Because that's pretty much gone out, even the web pages are gone and everything, so that's, last thing I have is, since I have such a history and everything with parks and everything, I really know the value of Bush Park. And I have concerns about the proposed baseball facility and my way I feel about it, I wouldn't vote for it. I would vote no for that, but I guess that's enough.
Well, appreciate it, guys. You both contributed a lot to the discussions that we've had over the past several years, and so we really just want to recognize the value that that's brought to this board and to our ability to represent the community that we're striving to represent and to help guide the future and the continual improvements of our park system. So thank you for that. I am certain there will be more volunteer opportunities to engage with the city and to lend your expertise. And at a very minimum, we always have a public comment opportunity at our boards, and so would welcome your guidance and thoughts during that time or at any other time. So thank you very much.
One last thing.
Go for it.
Probably the big reason why I wanted to get this board is because I'm so concerned about livability in this community. And I also know that you know, I went to a meeting once where somebody from the park said that we have the same amount of green space that Eugene does, a comparable size city, and we have 1/3 the budget that Eugene has. And so, you know, okay, let's go see if we can fund our, you know, well, we have a very limited role in that, obviously. And now, you know, we're highly underfunded to begin with, and then we have all these cuts. So my hope for the board going on is that somehow we can figure out how to fund our parks and our rec.
We're working on it.
Yeah,
I'm working.
good luck.
Kind of.
Yeah, I'd say one more thing. There was a parks levy proposed, put up for vote, and I think it was 1980 or 85. It failed. And I lost my job then. And parks, there were park rangers, and there was a whole bunch of parks that was lost because of that levy. So that was a lot to be built back up from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
In the best of times, it's not been good.
Well, that concludes our agenda unless anyone else has new business or anything they'd like to say. Al.
I merely wanted to say and acknowledge the thanks of appreciation for the volunteer work that's been done, both by Rick and Woody, but it should be noted that our staff is vastly outnumbered by an army of volunteers that are helping to maintain and keep up our parks. And it is an invaluable part of what keeps our city running and operating and livable. We have so many volunteers. I think Amanda Sitter must be really busy shuffling and driving all of the different people that are coming and going and scheduling things. I'm really deeply grateful for the great number of retirees and people all over the community that get out and do this stuff. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Woody. And I would like to think that we could somehow continue to acknowledge and appreciate all of the vast number of volunteers that help us out. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Al. Any other thoughts or new business? All right, with that, I will call the meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your participation today. We will see you in June. Anything else I'm supposed to say? Okay.